In this lesson, we're going to quickly review ratios and unit rates, and then we're going to go over a couple of examples that show you how to convert rates. So remember, a ratio is simply comparing two values. So if we look in the top left corner, we have ratios. 3/15. That's a ratio. If we write a ratio in simplest form, that means we take out common factors. For example, we could take out 3 from both 3 and 15, and we would simplify it to 1/5. We have unit rates, and those are rates or ratios that have to do with tracking values in certain units. So, for example, 75 miles in 3 hours. Right? So that is a rate, 75 miles in 3 hours. Okay? A unit rate, that's referring to not simplest form, but it's talking about when the denominator is equal to 1. So we can figure out how many miles per hour are we traveling. Okay? Unit price, this one talks about usually how much it's going to cost per certain units. For example, if it's $2.40 for 6 ounces, the unit price would be 40 cents per ounce. Now, we're going to use these skills of ratios, and we're going to look at a couple of examples of converting rates. So, what happens when we have something like 12 miles per hour, but we want to know how many feet per minute we are traveling? Well, first of all, something I like to do is make a plan. Okay, well, I know miles, I know I need to get miles into feet. Right? So I need to get miles into feet. And then I also need to get, hours into minutes. Well, I need to get hours into minutes. Okay. So it's important to make sure you know your conversions. So for example, down here I have a few examples of what we need for these two problems. You'll want to have all the different conversions handy for you. But I have 1 gallon equals 4 quarts, I have a mile equals 5,280 feet, and I have an hour equals 60 minutes. So how I would start this is I'm going to turn this into a fraction, right? 12 miles per hour, I could write like this. Because I go 12 miles in 1 hour, okay? And I need to change it into feet per minute. So I know I need to turn miles into feet, and I need to turn hours into minutes. So you can choose either one. Either one's going to work. But what you're going to do is you are going to multiply, and you're going to take the conversion. So since I know miles to feet, right, I know that 1 mile is 5,280 feet, all right, that what you're going to do is you're going to take that conversion, and you're going to create a fraction here. And how you're going to create that fraction is, well, since it's 12 miles, and that's in my numerator, I want the other mile symbol to be in the denominator. I always want to have the same symbols across from each other. Okay? So, if I've got 1 mile equals 5,280 feet, that is how I would set it up. Okay? And, right, I look mile and mile. They're across from each other. Okay? Now, one thing, when I multiply this, we're actually finding an equivalent fraction when we do this. And it might not look like that, and you might not realize it, but remember, any number times the number 1 is the same number. Well, 5,280 divided by 1 is not 1, but since 5,280 feet equals 1 mile, right, I could convert that mile into 5,280, and then it would be 5,280 over 5,280, which would be equal to 1. So since these are the conversions for these units, this equals this, it's really like we're multiplying by the number 1. So we're keeping equivalent fractions. So this will help me to turn my miles into feet, but I need also hours into minutes. So this time I need my 1 hour equals 60 minutes. Well, I'm going to multiply again, and then I need to take, well, if hours this time is in my denominator, that means I need hours in my numerator because it needs to stay across. Well, 1 hour equals 60 minutes. So this will help me to change it to feet. This will help me to turn it into minutes. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say, well, that's 12. 12 times 5,280. And then times by 1, well, that's the identity property of multiplication. I don't need to write that. And then this would be 1 times 1, which is 1, times 60. Oh, so 60 goes here. Okay. And then you need to look, and I like to cancel out this mile and mile, right? I look across and I say, all right, that's hour and hour. Okay, what I'm left with is feet and minutes. But this is not as simple as it could be. So I'm going to get my calculator, multiply the numerator, 5,280 feet. That's going to get me 63,360 over 60, still feet a minute. And then I'm going to divide that by 60. And so that will get me 1,056 feet per minute. Alright, for number 2. For number 2, I'm getting my quarts to gallons. Alright, so quarts to gallons, right? If you make a plan. Sometimes you're going to have to take multiple steps. These ones are both, right? I can go quarts right to gallons because I have that conversion. But sometimes you might not have the conversion and you might have to take multiple steps to get there. I have minutes to hours. Okay. Minutes to hours. So I know I need to take those 2 steps. Okay, so 3.5 quarts in 1 minute. And I want to know how many gallons per hour. Okay, so first I'm going to take quarts to gallons. Well, 1 gallon equals 4 quarts. I'm going to multiply my quarts, since it's in the numerator. The new one is going to go in the denominator. So 4 quarts equals 1 gallon. I'm going to multiply then, because that takes care of this. Multiply, I need minutes to hours. I have 60 minutes equals 1 hour. Okay? Since minutes is in my denominator, I put it in my numerator. So I have 60 minutes is 1 hour. Okay? Multiply, I get 3.5 times by 60 over 4. And I'm going to cancel out any of the matches, minutes and minutes, leaving me with gallons and hours. Well, I'm going to plug that into my calculator. 3.5 times 60 is 210 gallons in 4 hours. Alright, and then we're going to divide to get 52.5 gallons in 1 hour. Okay. Now I did notice sometimes I do write my abbreviations HR for hours. I've seen it both ways. I'm not going to be too particular. I understand both of them. So the answer there is 52.5 gallons is in 1 hour. And these are some examples of converting rates and then a review on ratios and unit rates.